Well, ever since Joe Biden became president, and especially in the build up to the 2022 midterm election, the Republican Party has been telling us that if they could get into the majority in the House of Representatives, as they now have done, and have control over the House Oversight Committee, be able to do congressional investigations, they could reveal the corruption of Joe Biden, the true and horrible corruption and coordination that went on with Biden, the FBI, and Twitter to suppress bad information about Biden to help Biden in the 2020 election. Now, we walked through, because those claims have been around for a while, the dishonesty of them. But now this is the Republican Party's big moment. And it was a flop. They had these House Oversight Committee congressional hearings and brought Twitter employees in front of Congress to ask them about all these different questions and to spread all these different claims about the horrible corruption of Joe Biden and Twitter, and how Twitter caused Trump to lose the 2020 election. And so many wild things came out of this. Before I discuss further, let's start off with this just to give you a sense of how cartoonish these hearings became and embarrassing for the GOP. And again, it was supposed to be their moment, which makes this even more hilarious, where Marjorie Greene makes clear what her real concern is with this.
But you violated me. What were my tweets? Okay, let's talk about them. I was talking about the deaths being reported on VAERS. By the way, that's on the CDC website. I was also saying that I didn't think any entity should enforce a non-FDA approved vaccine or mask. Guess what? A lot of people agreed with me, but you called that COVID misinformation. By the way, I'm a member of Congress and you're not.
Nailed it. So these, hearings on the handling of the Hunter Biden laptop story by Twitter turned into, there was a moment with Lauren Boebert too, but there's so many things we won't be able to cover just because there were so many moments that were interesting from this. And Marjorie Greene, Lauren Boebert take it as an opportunity to complain about their own accounts having tweets flagged or being suspended because of different batches of misinformation that we're spreading. And this brings us to the conversation, and then we'll look at so many more fascinating elements of this hearing. The conversation of, it's strange how much confusion there is on the difference between the First Amendment and private social media platforms and their decisions on how they manage those platforms. Because I think it's a perfectly fair conversation to have. What should the terms of service of Twitter be? And as users, collectively, we could pressure them to change them to our liking. But what is being done here dishonestly by the GOP is trying to frame the decisions of Twitter as almost a governmental power and make it a First Amendment issue. She started off with, you violated me. And the narrative we've heard so much is, you're violating our freedom of speech. Now, if Marjorie Greene, even though, as she noted there, she's a congresswoman, decides to join a platform like Twitter, she's subjected to the terms of service of that private company's social media platform. Again, you can disagree with the policies, you can try to push to change them, but using your power as a congressperson to question employees of Twitter about why your tweets were flagged during a very important and critical time where misinformation was causing a lot of harm is quite the improper usage of that position of power, I would say. Now we move on, getting away from just the random tangents we saw from Marjorie Greene and others, to some of the main narratives coming out of these hearings. Again, what they're supposed to be looking at is, how did Twitter mishandle the Hunter Biden laptop story? And the story is, the New York Post released this big story about how Biden and Hunter Biden and the laptop and all these different things. And it was temporarily taken down, the New York Post's account, because Twitter marked it as misinformation. Then they realized it wasn't rising to the level of misinformation that would warrant that. And so they put it back up on the platform before the election, and it actually got even more coverage because it was taken down. So this story of this caused the difference in the election is quite silly. And platforms make mistakes, and we can be mad at them for that. And they said we shouldn't have taken it down at all. But again, they put it back up before the election even took place. And so that's what all of this kind of blossomed out of. And we get to the part of this that has been so widely misunderstood, which is the Biden campaign's role. And the moment I'm about to show you here is one of the Twitter executives or employees getting asked about communications that were revealed through the Twitter files that Elon Musk enlisted Matt Taibbi to do that showed the Biden campaign being in communications with Twitter saying, hey, here are some posts or some tweets that we think are against your policies. Could you take a look at them? And they'll freak out about that, ignoring that the Trump administration, as we'll get to later, really funny moment on that, did the exact same thing and had the exact same access as the Biden campaign. And this was actually the government, the Trump administration. And so again, they ignore that because it's just obvious hypocrisy. But let's take a look at this moment and we'll discuss further.
Reports like this.
Do you know how many tweets were actually flagged and taken down at the behest of the Biden team?
And this is Representative Byron Donalds.
I wouldn't agree with the characterization of it as being at the behest of them. These tweets were reported, and Twitter independently evaluated them under its rules.
But the email is very clear. More to review from Biden team. The response 3 hours later at the bottom, hold this up real quick so we can see. The request at the bottom, it says, handled these. What does handled these mean?
My understanding is that these tweets contained non-consensual nude photos of Hunter Biden, and they were removed by the company under.
Hold on, real quick, Mr. Roth. How could you know so much about the content of these tweets? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, these are just web addresses. I don't know what's in these tweets. You have these things committed to memory that you know the content, but you don't know who you talk to at the Biden team?
Sir, I didn't meet with the Biden team, but there was extensive public reporting about these tweets specifically that uncovered what they were.
You know the content.
Yes. So the links he's talking about there, because this has been reported on extensively, are known to be links to content that had not unconsensually released photos of Hunter Biden within them. And that's against Twitter's terms of service. The Biden campaign came to Twitter and said, hey, this is against your terms of service. Twitter said, we'll look at it independently. They did. They took it down. And because, again, against their terms of service. Now, the Trump administration had also asked for things to be taken down. And you can have a problem with the fact that powerful people, politicians, whatever it might be, have more access to high ups at companies like Twitter. You can have a problem with that. But if you're going to freak out about the Biden campaign, you would have to freak out about the actual government if you're making this a First Amendment issue. And the role that Trump had in that. Then you have Representative Clay Higgins threatening the arrest of these Twitter employees.
You, ladies and gentlemen, interfered with the United States of America 2020 presidential election, knowingly and willingly. That's the bad news. It's going to get worse because this is the investigation part. Later comes the arrest part.
Completely uncalled for and dangerous rhetoric there. Now we get to some of the Democratic representatives' moments during this that were absolutely wonderful. And just so that I cover all the different random things that were being thrown out there, the other narrative that they ran with a lot was the FBI, because they also had communications with Twitter at some point, saying, hey, just like we saw in the last election, be prepared, be on the lookout, because a lot of misinformation, possible foreign influence is going to come in before the election, likely on Twitter. And that was taken to mean the FBI was forcing Twitter into suppressing bad things about Biden, which has not been proven. And of course, the FBI, with their extensive intelligence apparatus, we all should be concerned about the idea that foreign governments will try to influence our elections, and the mindset of Americans through social media is going to provide some information to companies like Twitter and other social media platforms, and they communicate with private industry in so many different ways as well. And as long as they're doing that, but leaving it up to the company to make the final decision, that should be okay. Now, if they were forcing Twitter to do something in particular, now that would be a different discussion. Okay, now we get to the Democratic representatives' moments here. This is Representative Maxwell Frost, and you probably have already seen the viral moment we'll get to second, but first this.
Sitting here for over 2 hours, and I'm still not really seeing the point of this hearing. Is it to solve the problems of the American people, what people are struggling with? No. We get it. My Republican colleagues wish that the Hunter Biden story would have helped them win the 2020 election, and that didn't happen. And so they're angry about it, and that's the point of this hearing. You know, it was actually the foundation of the chairman's opening statement. It's why he brought up that poll on the 2020 election. That's what this is all about. And sitting here for over 2 hours.
It is strange because I have wondered, when will the Republican Party realize that running on Hunter Biden to take down Joe Biden is just not a winning issue, as has been shown time and time again now. And then the biggest moment from this hearing, where the point I was previously alluding to before, that the Trump administration, the Trump White House had gone to Twitter asking for things to be taken down, is explained here.
Ms. Naravoli, earlier you testified about a 2019 tweet that was about President Trump. And I think it was from Ms. Teagan. What was the tweet about?
Would you like me to give the direct quote?
Yeah.
Please excuse my language. This is a direct quote, but Chrissy Teigen referred to Donald Trump as a pussy-ass bitch.
Okay. Free speech. And what happened after Ms. Teagan posted her tweet? What did the White House do? What did the Trump White House do?
From my understanding, the White House reached out to ask that this tweet be removed. It was my team's job. This fell underneath the policy for abusive behaviors, and we evaluated underneath our insults policy. At that time, up to 3 insults were allowed, and so it was our job to determine how many insults were.
Right. So the Trump White House, because Trump got called some mean words, were going to Twitter, had closer access, just like the Biden campaign, but this was the actual government. So if you're caring about the First Amendment, saying that, oh my goodness, free speech is being violated because things were requested to be taken down from the platform of Twitter, then you have to care about the Trump White House going to Twitter and asking for something to be taken down for quite the petty reason. People call other people mean words all the time. That shouldn't be something you try to or even just waste time on. It should be something you waste time on caring about. And then super importantly, here is AOC highlighting a fascinating element of this.
Into it. Ms. Navaroli, let's talk about something real. I'd like to show you a tweet posted by former President Trump about my colleagues and I on July 14th, 2019. It says in part, quote, "Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Then come back and show us how it's done. These places need your help badly. You can't leave fast enough. I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi would be very happy as quickly to work out free travel arrangements." A day or two after that, Donald Trump publicly incited, violence at a rally, targeting 4 congresswomen, including myself, saying, "Go back to where you came from." Ms. Navaroli, as I understand it, you were the most senior member of Twitter's content moderation team, or a senior member of Twitter's content moderation team when this was posted. As part of your responsibilities, did you review this tweet?
Yes, it was my team's responsibility to review these tweets.
And what did you conclude?
My team made the recommendation that for the first time we find Donald Trump in violation of Twitter's policies and use the public interest interstitial.
For the first time?
Yes.
And at the time, Twitter's policy included a specific example when it came to banned abuse against immigrants, as they specifically included the phrase, "Go back to your country," or go back to where you came from, correct?
Yes, that was specifically included in the content moderation guidance as an example.
You brought this up to the Vice President of Trust and Safety, Del Harvey, correct?
I did, yes.
And she overrode your assessment, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And something interesting happened after she overrode your assessment. A day or two later, Twitter seemed to have changed their policies, didn't they?
Yes, that trope, "go back to where you came from," was removed from the content moderation guidance as an example.
So Twitter changed their own policy after the president violated it in order to potentially accommodate his tweet?
Yes.
So the narrative that conservatives have been running with, that not only did Twitter do all this horrible stuff to suppress bad information about Biden, they also go after conservatives and try to censor conservatives and are harder on conservatives. The reality is AOC and one of the individuals appearing at this hearing from Twitter highlighted there is the exact opposite. Twitter changed its policy to accommodate Trump, changed its policy to allow him to continue to spew the rhetoric he was spewing. So they gave him preferential treatment. That's the opposite of what we've heard from conservatives. It is so wild.